There are some things that are so well attested in science, so often observed, and so able to be repeated through experiments that we actually call them a scientific law. And one of the scientific laws we have is the law of biogenesis. This is the scientific law that life does not arise from non living things. And this has been known for several hundred years. The science is clear. There's never been a violation of the law of biogenesis. But for some reason, there are so many people who think that by believing life arises by non through natural processes or from non-living chemical substances, they think that they are adopting a more scientific view when the exact opposite is true. If you believe that life arose by natural processes, by from non-living chemical substances, you are actually believing something that defies all of our scientific observations. You are believing an anti scientific religious myth. So, this is what I want to talk about today because I think a lot of people are in that trap. And a little bit later, I will be happy to invite on anyone who wants to come and challenge the law of biogenesis because I can guarantee no matter how many degrees you have, no matter how much scientific knowledge you have, there is not going to be anyone who will be able to come on my channel and show us a violation of the laws of biogenesis. So, what the law of biogenesis states is that life arises from pre existing life, not from non living matter. It means that a non living thing would not have the capacity to engender a living thing. Not only another life can do that. The complex organized structures and processes in living organisms cannot spontaneously arise or develop through chemical reactions or physical means alone. They require a pre existing living system as the source of new life. And the more that science develops, the more experiments that we've done to show this, we've only gotten farther and farther from being able to produce life. We've found it harder and harder than we ever thought it was going to be back in the 1950s, where there was a lot less information about how living systems work. And so I want to talk about some of the problems with life arising by natural processes. And I'm by no means an expert on this. Okay, so I've already put some links down below in the description if you want to look at some of the things that I'm talking about. I'm not an expert, but the reason I think it's important to do this is because there's so much non-scientific bogus stuff that people are being taught. And I want you to know the truth. I want you to know the truth that life does not arise by non living things. And so there has to be another explanation for life. Now, some people will say, well, we have the theory of abiogenesis. Well, it's just a theory. Still, it's a scientific theory. Well, usually when something is a scientific theory, it means that there are observations, scientific observations that are backing it up. But unfortunately, with abiogenesis, we do not have scientific observations that demonstrate that abiogenesis could be true. Every experiment that we've done shows the opposite. We have not found observational evidence that shows that life could arise from non-living things. And yet, this is still being passed off as if it is the scientific explanation for life. So, if you want to be scientific about your ideas about how life arose, the most scientific position that you can take is that life does not arise by natural processes. Life does not come from non-life. Now, you can take that anywhere you want with where you could say maybe it comes from aliens, although that only pushes back the difficulty one step, because you still are going to have to come up with where did those aliens how did life arise on some other planet, in some other place in the universe. So I think the most logical conclusion to make is that there is a God who created life. Now, again, that is something that I believe. It's not something I'm here to scientifically prove, but I'm just trying to show you what the most scientific, if you want to be scientific about where life arises, what our observations show is that life only arises from other living things. It does not arise spontaneously. It does not arise from chemical substances. So no matter how many millions of millions of dollars we've spent trying to get chemicals to stick together to form the building blocks of life and then to get us to the next step of life, we have not been able to do that. And that's with intelligence involved. That's with people trying to make life form. So life does not arise from non-living things. And we'll talk about some of the problems with it. So one of the problems with life coming about by natural processes, by non-living chemicals, is that those chemicals don't want to stick together. And there's lots of, videos you can watch on that. Just look up the problems with, chemicals forming life, and you'll find that there's problems at the basic foundation where we cannot produce the chemicals that are necessary for building proteins and getting them to have the same chirality, the amino acids that a lot of people will bring up the Miller-Urey experiment and say, look, they formed amino acids. They formed left-handed and right-handed amino acids when all of life only has left-handed amino acids. And so if you get a mixture of left-handed and right-handed amino acids, which are only the basic building blocks of life, you're not even close to getting what you actually need for life. But some of the main problems with this idea of life coming from natural processes is the numerous chicken and egg problems. And there's many of them. I'm only going to mention a few. So one of the chicken and egg problems is the need for harnessing energy. And so every cell needs to be able to have a source of energy and be able to harness energy. But the problem is, and we have in every cell in life, we have a fantastic process of harnessing energy. So in human cells, you have a wonderful machine that does it for you. It's called ATP synthase. And that ATP synthase takes I put a video in the link below in case I'm just not describing this well, but it takes particles, protons, and it helps them to be charged into an energy source called ATP. And ATP powers all the things that are going on in your cell, all the processes that need energy. It's kind of like a little battery. And so ATP is needed even for the building of proteins. Well, but the problem is that ATP synthase, the machine that builds the ATP, already has to be in place. You need ATP to build ATP synthase, and ATP synthase itself is a protein. So you can't even get the protein without the ATP synthase. So there's so many problems like that. There's the problems of, first, the other chicken and egg problems is you need the proteins in order to get DNA replication. You need all of these systems in place. You need proteins that are going to facilitate that. But how do you get those proteins when you need the proteins themselves from the beginning to be able to do the DNA replication. So there's another, you have to have all the systems in place. You also have to have the error correcting machinery in place so that your DNA doesn't get corrupted. So these are a few of the chicken and egg problems. Another one is the problem of membranes. In you have to have a cell membrane that is able to bring in things that are important for the cell and kick out things that are waste or things that the cell doesn't need, and keep out things that would be poisonous to the cell. And so every cell has around, in the cell membrane, built into the cell membrane, is all of this machinery, all of these ion channels that allow certain things into the cell and make other things go out. And if you don't have that machinery in place, then the cell is not going to work. And there are, so many metabolic processes that are happening within the cell that require the whole system to be in place. So there doesn't seem to be a way that a step-by-step process could create something like a cell. So this is one of the many problems. There's also, even in all cells in life, there are things that are working for the process, like topoisomerase, which is basically like a little scissors in your cells that they do an essential function, and if this function does not happen, your cells will die. And what topoisomerase does is, when the DNA is getting replicated, the part that is the strand part that has not yet been separated, it gets twisted up. It gets totally twisted up. And if there's nothing to stop that process, the DNA replication will not be able to happen. So it'll get too twisted up, it'll get too tangled up. But thankfully, in every cell in life, we have a little machine called topoisomerase that seems to, for some reason, know exactly what to do. It's like a little scissors, and it goes and it cuts the DNA and it untangles it, allows the supercoiling to be undone, and then it splices it back together. So without this machine, you cannot have DNA replication. But you need this machine there from the beginning, and you need a machine that knows exactly what needs to be done. So, some people will say, well, the earliest cells may not have had that. Well, we've tried to take the most basic cells that we have, like basically the simplest cell is something like microplasmic genitalium, something like that. I might be mispronouncing that, but basically we try to take one of those simple bacterium and strip out a bunch of the genes, a bunch of what was in the cell, and try to make the simplest living thing. And it turns out that in order to survive, it still needed 493 genes. So, and even then it was quite crippled and had a hard time surviving. So, this is not something, when we're trying to figure out the simplest life that we can possibly put together, still has the need for so many systems in place that really cannot arise by a step-by-step process. They need to already be in place for the cell to function. And so even if we take DNA itself, this is also something, if we just follow our scientific observations of the world is that code does not arise except by an intelligent being. We don't see codes writing themselves. If you encountered a computer code, you would automatically know that that was made by a human being. You would not suppose that it arose by natural processes. And DNA is the most fantastic code we've ever encountered. It's an incredible code. It is so efficient, it's so amazing. And yet, there are people who want to try to say that this code, the best code that we've ever encountered, was somehow not formed, that it's somehow formed by spontaneously by natural processes. That is not a scientific idea. That defies scientific observations. So even DNA itself is a problem for getting uh, life to arise by natural processes. But even with DNA, even if you had DNA pop out of nowhere, which is already defying our scientific observations, in order to have life, you need a whole host of things that are able to help that life reproduce. And so, and all of those require incredibly complex processes. So I just want to, and if anybody challenges this, it was, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I'll check the comments in a minute, and maybe I'll let some people join. I'll put the link in the chat if anybody wants to join and challenge this. But I challenge you, if you would like to be scientific about the way that you think about life, then follow our scientific observations. Our scientific observations all go in one direction, that life does not come from non-living substances. So, and I just looked up because I was like, okay, I'm going to look up what is the difference between biogenesis and abiogenesis. And here's what AI told me. Abiogenesis refers to the theory that life originated from non-living matter, while biogenesis states that life can only come from pre-existing life. Essentially, abiogenesis is the idea of life arising from non-life, whereas biogenesis is the idea of life arising from existing life. Now, which one of those ideas do we actually have scientific observations for? We have scientific observations for biogenesis, the law of biogenesis. We do not have scientific observations that back up this idea that life arises from non-living things. Now, and here's just one quote, and there are many quotes I could pull on this, but this comes from a book called Biology: A Search for Order in Complexity, which says, historically, the point of view that life comes only from life has been so well established through the facts revealed by experiment that it is called the law of biogenesis. Uh, you know, let's see, even evolutionist John Maddox, who was the editor of Nature magazine for many years, said it is disappointing that the origin of the genetic code is still as obscure as the origin of life itself. Now, evolutionist Paul Davies, and he's a theoretical physicist, and has written many things on the origin of life, and he still says one of the great outstanding scientific mysteries is the origin of life. How did it happen? The truth is, nobody has a clue. Okay. So, and from another book, Biochemical Evolution by Athol Cornish Bowden, he says this: thus, not only can we apparently prove that life could not have originated on Earth, we can prove almost as easily that it could not have originated anywhere. Yet, this conclusion must be wrong, for we are here to discuss it. And we know that life does exist on Earth, so any proof otherwise must be flawed. It seems to me that there are only two possible ways out of the difficulty. Either a divine intelligence planted life on Earth in a deliberate act, or the probability calculations outlined above are incorrect. So he had gone through all these mathematical calculations. And by the way, he's very strongly against the idea of a divine intelligence placing life on Earth, but he's determined to find evidence or a way to show that the calculations are wrong, even though he himself admits that we can really prove that life could not have originated here on Earth or anywhere else. Okay, so let's just see what's going on in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and put the link if anybody would like to come in and share your thoughts on this. And I would really like to stay on topic here because I know there's a lot of different ways that we could take this, but I would like to stay on the topic of let's be scientific about our ideas about the origin of life. Are you being scientific about your ideas about the origin of life? Or do you buy into an anti-scientific myth that does not line up with our observations? Do you believe in abiogenesis? If it's fine if that's your belief. If you believe that somehow abiogenesis can, in spite of all our scientific observations, still explain life on Earth, well, then have at it. But let's be honest about it. It's not the scientific path. It is not following our observations in science. Okay, so let's see what the viewers have to say. Sandal says, I wonder if science then says that we are made by unnatural or supernatural processes. Well, I don't know. It depends on what your definition of supernatural is. And that's my own comment. Okay, so Andre says, life is the biggest miracle and we are part of it. How beautiful. Yes, it is a beautiful thing to be part of life. And Andre says, no need for exceptionalism or negation of science. Isn't it a wonder that we all may rejoice in being built out of cells, the beauty of creation? Yes. And he says unicellular organisms are also part of what we call us human. Yes. And I don't like to think about all the unicellular organisms that are part of my body right now, but it is true that they are really an essential part of life. B.S. Lewis says, can Rebecca explain what a supernatural process is to me? I think that's beyond the scope of this video, because what I'm really talking about here is the science. I want to stick on the science. I don't want to be carried away by arguing about some philosophical idea about what supernatural means. So I think that could easily carry us away from the scientific subject that we're talking about, which is life does not arise from non-living substances. So Antonia says, how would we know if there is a supernatural process at all? Well, and again, I think the supernatural stuff is taking us off of topic. Why don't we just talk about what we observe, what we can empirically test? And so what can we learn from our observations of reality? And so what we have learned, from what I can see, is that our scientific observations show us that life does not arise by natural processes. And of course, that could change. Hey, if somebody suddenly is able to show that life arises from non-living things, that chemicals can naturally produce life, okay, then we will have a superseded scientific law. We'll have then that would show that the law of biogenesis has been violated, and then we could say it would be the more scientific path to believe that life could come from non-life. But until that happens, why not just be scientific in the way that you think about life? And right now, the observations all show that life does not arise from non-living things. So Andre says, "Isn't it wonderful to be part of life? That was my realization while studying biochemical processes, and I never came out of that awe." Yes, and one of the things I'm concerned about with people is that people are losing their sense of awe, and I think that actually comes from being taught all of these anti-scientific religious myths that are being passed off as science. So people are being just kind of taught that, oh, life from chemicals, no big deal. That's no problem. Hey, it's all just easy. When the reality is that life is so incredibly complex, it requires so much to be in place, and that there is so much to be in awe about. The more that we learn, the more that we realize how incredible life is. Scientists, before they could really see what was going on in the cell, they just kind of thought cells were like protoplasm and there wasn't that much going on. So our anti-scientific ideas about life coming about by natural processes were seemed plausible then, but the more that we learn, the more implausible it becomes to try to believe that life could come about spontaneously. And actually, that's what, if you guys remember when Cy Gart came on. Cy Gart is a biochemist who was an atheist for a long time, and then he actually came to know the Lord. But he really talks about how so many things in science were what started to point him to a creator. And he says he thinks that atheists will eventually have to abandon science in order to hold their atheism. And I think that's already true. I think you already have to believe so many things that are anti scientific religious myths in order to be able to take atheism seriously. So, hi, Andre.
Hi there.
And
I'm
how are
so glad that you're talking about that subject. I'm so um I'm 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 so impressed by the complexity of life. That was always for me the, one of the most incredible ways of knowing God was through the complexity of and really the fact that we are all part of one thing, not divisible. Every cell in us is a hybrid of an eukaryote and a prokaryote. We wouldn't work without the mitochondria. I mean, it's a part of us. That's what we call us. And it's one thing. Isn't it a wonderful and a miracle? I'm sorry, but I'm excited about you talking about the subject. Thank you.
Oh, good, because I want to keep talking about this because
Yeah.
I'm serious. This is one of the things that burns in me. It burns me so much to hear people say that, "Oh yeah, I used to believe in religion, but now I believe in science." Okay, you know, but then what they've come to believe about science is that they believe science is showing that life was came about by a natural process, chemical evolution. Hey, it just arose. And that is so wrong. It is so against our scientific observations that it really hurts me to hear people having that belief. And I think this is one of the main obstacles that people have to faith, is because they have mostly, if they've grown up in a Western education, they have been taught that life comes from non-living things. It's in every, even college textbooks will talk about the primordial soup as if this is something that we know happened, that life, was able to, arise from a primordial soup or a hydrothermic vent. And so even though we do not have scientific observations to back that up, it's still in the science textbooks. And so that's what people are being taught. And then they're basing their whole perception of reality on a non-scientific view that's actually being peddled as a scientific view of reality.
Yeah. And since really your intention is not to, is to recognize the presence of a creator. The I totally agree with you that the complexity of those processes show us the need for something else. We just don't know. It's okay. I mean, we have no idea, but there's no register of a simple form or something that isn't part of the same. I mean, we can call life one organism.
Yeah, and and for those who are watching, you know what? If you want to challenge, if you know anyone who can challenge the law of biogenesis, I welcome them. Tell them about this. I'm going to do this again. I don't care how many degrees they have. I don't care how much scientific knowledge they have. I will talk to them and challenge. They're not going to be able to produce something that violates the law of biogenesis. So I welcome anyone trying to do that. And so please do get someone to come on here and challenge me. I would love it. I would really love it, because there's people who have a lot more scientific knowledge than me, but they do not and cannot show that life comes from non-living things. And unfortunately, there are sensational media things that happen in the media. Like, you'll see articles that say, scientists have now created synthetic cells in the lab. Okay. It's very misleading, because they want to, it sounds like what they're doing is creating a cell from non-living things. And that is not what they are doing. Look, the devil is in the details. Read the experiments. What they do is they take a living cell and they strip some stuff out of it. They keep the cell membrane and they keep some important stuff. And then they take some other set, they take other things that are chemicals that they've taken out of life already. They didn't create the chemicals in the lab. They take it from life and then they insert it into the other cell and they say, oh, we created a synthetic cell. When all along they're using all stuff that comes from life. Because you cannot, even if you have all the stuff of life, you cannot make life. Even what I've heard Dr. James Tour talk about this, and by the way, all of his stuff on the origin of life is amazing. But he talks about how tell an origin of life researcher, give them a cell that just died and tell them, bring it back to life. You've got everything there. You've got everything you need for life. But why is it that we can't even do that? You've got all the chemical components of life. You've even got all the proteins and structures in place. You've got the DNA, but we can't even do that with all the things already in place. Do you want to say something on that? Okay, I'm gonna go. I'll put up some comments. So let's see. Antonio says, that's good for you. This is actually in response to you, Andre. I think he says, that's good for you because you were saying it's wonderful to be part of life. But I'm sure there are people who don't have a life as good as yours. Oh, and Tangelo's here. Oh, Tangelo, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, hi, Rebecca. Hi, Andre.
Hi there, Tangelo.
I want to hear your thoughts on this because I know you have a lot to say on this. But let's let Andre, if he wants, respond to Antonio, and I'll respond to Antonio as well.
The thing about not having a life as good as mine, I don't know where the point is. I apologize. I mean, it's just, I mean, it relates to us all. It's just the realization of a miracle, and not something that divides us, but that we can all agree.
Yes, and I recognize that there are lots of people in the world who don't have a life as good as mine, but there are lots of people who have horrible living conditions who still recognize the miracle of life and appreciate it and recognize that there is a being who created them, and they are able to have hope in that creator. And okay, so I'll let you go ahead and share what you want to share, Otangelo.
Yeah, I of course agree with everything which you said, which I heard in the last 5 minutes. And I'd say that the origin of life quest is one of my favorite topics. And I am currently writing a 3 volume treatise or book on the origin of life, which starts with the chemicals on a prebiotic earth and then the trajectory that it would have to go through to get a self-replicating, free-living minimal cell. And in my book, I will um, list about 2,000 unsolved problems in regards of the origin of life. So 2,000 problems. I mean, and of these 2,000, if one if 1,999 would be solved and the last one would not be solved, you wouldn't have life. Like, for example, the homochirality problem. But one of the most treated problems is the fact that there was no prebiotic natural selection. And the 4 basic building blocks of life, they are complex macromolecules which are synthesized in the cell by very complex biosynthesis and metabolic procedures and pathways. And of course, these pathways, they were not extant prebiotically because they are based on living cells. They use molecular machines, proteins, which are interconnected together, and they produce the basic building blocks. So that creates a chicken and egg problem. You need the basic building blocks to make the proteins, but the proteins, they are required to make the basic building blocks. So what came first? And what scientists and origin of life researchers try to do, they are trying to find how on the prebiotic earth chemical procedures and ways eventually could have come up with these basic building blocks and then polymerized and chained together. This alone is already an unsolved and huge problem because, as I said previously, there was no natural selection, and you need, for example, nucleotides. They are made of the nucleobase, the ribose, which is the backbone, and phosphorus, and these are very specific. The nucleobase, you cannot take any kind of nucleobase. It has to have a very specific isomeric atomic composition. It has to be attached to the ribose backbone, which is the sugar, at the right prime place. And the phosphorus also has to be put at the right place in the nucleotide. And if you have an innumerous number of different possibilities, so how does unguided random events choose where the right connection place is of each molecule? With amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, it's the same problem. In life, there are 20 amino acids used amongst hundreds and hundreds which are supposedly extant on the prebiotic earth. How were they selected out and then concentrated and then polymerized, which is also a huge problem. We don't know how that could have occurred on a prebiotic earth. This incatenation of amino acids in order that then they fold together in a 3D form and become functional proteins. So problems are right from the beginning to the end. So if you try to find a solution from a bottom-up procedure, you don't find a way because the problems begin right at the beginning. If you try to find an explanation from the bottom down approach, then you have to ask, for example, a ribosome, how did that come to be? And if you remove it from the cell, you have no translation, you have no life because they make proteins. So you have problems everywhere. And scientists and the popular newspapers, they try to constantly insert hope that the science is working on it and maybe they will find a solution. And it will be a naturalistic one. And that's just nonsense. This
I
will
know.
never
Let's go
happen.
with
Okay,
what.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but
Okay.
may I
Go
just
ahead.
one thing, just one thing.
Sure.
We are all on the same page, right? I mean, we're talking about life, and we all being one thing. No exceptionalism. We cannot talk about our genetical code being more complex than any part because we are part of it. Because it denies the whole idea of 6,000 years. I mean,
Okay, wait, hold up. Andre, I don't want to get off track on
okay,
this
I'm sorry,
topic
but it's
because
just,
I know
of
me and
course.
you are going to have a conflict when it comes to talking about evolution, right? And the age of the earth. But what I'm talking about now is just the idea of life coming from non-life. And so that is we're just talking about a very well established scientific law that life does not come from non-life. No one can dispute this. There's no scientific evidence that can
That's okay.
dispute
Yeah,
this simple
go ahead.
fact. And that's what I want to stick on because I want to get people away from this anti-scientific religious myth of abiogenesis. Now, Humble Thinker, actually, thank you for saying this. Please don't deny established science. That's what I'm encouraging all of you
Yeah.
people who are watching to do. Do not deny the established science that
Exactly.
life
And the
does
fact
not
that we are
come,
all related. We are
that
all part of
life,
one thing. We
okay,
cannot separate us. We cannot talk about humans as being something else. That's important. That's what we're
okay, we
talking
can talk
about.
about that on a different stream. Right now, we're talking about the difference between chemical substances and life, and that our scientific observations show that chemicals do not turn themselves into life. That does not
Okay.
happen by natural processes. And
Uh,
I
maybe
love
I can.
B.S. Lewis's thing here. Hold on. B.S. Lewis, this is hilarious. B.S. Lewis says, let's stay on track. Are you a dummy or not a dummy? Yes, please do not be a dummy. Do not believe what you hear about life comes from non-living things. That is non-scientific. We have no scientific observations for that. If you don't want to be a dummy, then follow what the scientific observations show, which is life only comes from other life, and life does not arise from chemicals by natural processes. Wow. I shut it down. You guys are so quiet now.
Well, I mean, the common perception is that scientists all claim that it is actually possible that life can come from non-life, but those which are working on the field and are actually honest about the real situation, they don't picture this positiveness. And I can quote here, for example, a very prominent scientist, Eugene Koonin. He wrote the book, The Logic of Chance, and he says the following: despite many interesting results to its credit, when judged by the straightforward criterion of reaching or even approaching the ultimate goal, the origin of life field is a failure. We still do not have even a plausible, coherent model, let alone a validated scenario for the emergence of life on Earth. Certainly, this is due not to lack of experimental or theoretical effort, but to the extraordinary intrinsic difficulty and complexity of the problem. A succession of exceedingly unlikely steps is essential for the origin of life, from the synthesis and accumulation of nucleotides to the origin of translation. Through the multiplication of probabilities, these make the final outcome seem almost like a miracle. And I could
Yes,
quote
yes,
many.
a miracle, but one miracle, and we are part of it. But please, one thing that's not getting off track. We are talking about the whole thing. We cannot separate. There's no exceptionalism. There's no way you can be talking about anything like accepting the existence of cells and dividing us from the rest of life. We are part of it. It's just
Well, I definitely
I'm
believe
just
in
being
human
I really would like you to
exceptionalism, but
accept
that's
the
not
fact I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I believe in human exceptionalism, so
But
that is.
how? That's
But
my
that's
point,
really a
Rebecca. If
different
we
topic for
are
a different day.
we are microbial. I mean, you cannot exist without your microbiome. You couldn't digest. You couldn't live any second if you weren't protected by cells that are unicellular organisms that live with you and are a part of you. Inside any
But,
of your
but
cells, there are.
Andre, what is your point? What do you try to convey?
No, it's kind of you because Tangelo, you're making a point of disagreeing with science, but you, uh, 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 I don't see the need for
Wait,
it. It's just that
what science is he disagreeing with?
well, he's talking about the scientists that try to prove as if science were the ones that are on the wrong side. But the truth is we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. We try to understand, but if we deny the fact that we know, and there's the observation we have that we are one thing, there's no way we can talk about us as being something different from the rest of what we call life. We are a part of it. We are all related. I mean, I'm sorry, but I can't see how we. I mean, you have to revise your position on creationism if you're talking about that. That's what I think.
Well, I mean, and that will be a very long conversation.
Okay, go ahead.
And
Yeah.
maybe we can have it another time because
Yes,
you know
of
I'm
course,
passionate
I
about
know,
this.
I know.
And yes, I completely reject evolution. Now, I don't mean I reject the idea of change within organisms, but I reject the idea that from natural processes, living things arose from non-living things and then continued on a path of life that led to the diversity of all the life we see today. So I reject that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I agree.
have the
I reject it
intention
too.
of making videos on that topic, and I have an entire other channel that discusses that called Examining Origins, and we're welcome to have a discussion on that. But you know, that involves a lot more than right now. We're talking about something, the main and plain science, which is life does not arise from non-living things. Anyone who denies that is a science denier. Anyone who denies that is anti-science. Okay,
Exactly.
that is clear.
Let's
science.
not be anti-science. We are life. We are one thing. And it's really
It is
not possible.
anti-science to say that life arises by natural processes. That is anti-science, because what does anti-science mean? Against science. What does it mean to be against science? It means to deny our scientific observations of the world. Our scientific observations of the world clearly show that life does not arise from non-living things.
And it shows that we are all related. And it shows that we all
Well, Andre, if you want to,
that's the only way.
Andre,
I'm just trying to understand how.
Andre, if you are claiming that we are one
at the same
thing,
time, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to understand how you can at the same time use that those arguments and not accept the fact that you are defending the idea that we descend from the first form of life.
yeah, Andre, I have actually written a book on endosymbiosis, which is the claim that prokaryotic cells evolved, or that two entities engulfed one each other, and then somehow by an macroevolutionary process, those became eukaryotic cells. I wrote an entire book on the subject, and I can tell you that this is impossible. So I have written another book on evolution, and I've listed 52 reasons why there is no universal common ancestry. So I believe in polyphily. That means that God created the species separately. And that has to be so, because you cannot start an environment that can host life if you don't have biodiversity right from the beginning.
No,
And
no,
that starts,
I'm sorry, Otangelo, I'm
and
sorry, but then
well,
that's
well,
not the point. I'm sorry, but then I apologize. I mean, you can go on. I don't know what your background is, but I totally disagree, and I think actually the fact that we all are composed, every cell is composed just the same. The difference are so minimal, and we are all part of one thing. We can see the degree of uh, uh, how similar we are to each other. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Andre,
I
you're
just
still
don't
bringing
accept
up
the
the
fact that.
other topic, and I'm asking you to please stop doing
Okay,
that.
okay, of
Because
course. No,
look,
yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's just, but then, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I celebrate the fact that life is a miracle, but then I
but do
accept
you
the
agree that life does
observation
not,
that life is one thing.
do
Go
you
ahead.
agree that life does not arise from non-living things?
I agree that that's a mystery. I agree that I have no idea how it began.
Okay, do you agree that all of our scientific observations show that life only comes from other living things?
Yeah, that was my my um, I mean, when I studied the complexity of any enzyme and any of one of those elements in the cell that are present in any cell and that are essential to those processes, yes, I agree that it's all a miracle, but it's also that's where we came from. That's us.
So, yeah, and that's the main point of this stream, is to really talk to people about what does
Okay.
the science show about
Okay.
where life comes from.
Mhm.
And life does not come from non-living things. So if you believe that right now, if anyone watching believes that, you should know that you are going against our scientific observations of the world. And that's the last thing I want to say. I'll let Andre or Otangelo, you can share your last points about this, and then then I'll close out the stream. So thank you guys.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I've said enough. I mean, but I appreciate this stream, and I just celebrate the fact. But as I said, I recognize that we are talking about us. We're talking about a thing. And if you're talking about genetic codes, I'm sorry, I won't get into the discussion, but there's no evidence that we are different kinds. There's no evidence of that. That's all I have to say. Let's stick to the evidence.
Yeah, let's stick to the evidence. Okay, Otangelo, go ahead.
yeah, I'll put some numbers here in order for people which will assist the stream have actually a grasp about the unlikeliness of life coming from non-life. So we are the working horses of the cells are proteins. Okay, they exercise all the kind of functions and which are essential for life to exist. And proteins are made of amino acids. These are strings of amino acids which are polymerized or stringed together. They form long chains, and once these chains are formed, then they will fold into a 3D configuration in order to become functional. And an average size of a protein is about 300 amino acids. Now, each position, each amino acid, um, each position there can be 20 different amino acids chosen to occupy one position of these 300 in average. That means that if you have just a random process, if you want to have a sequence which will become functional of 100 amino acids, the odds is 1 in 10 to the power of 130. And there are 1 to 10 to the power of 80 atoms in the entire universe. So the odds only to get one protein by random unguided events is in the realm of the impossible. Now, a minimal cell has around 1,200 proteins. Okay, so you would have to figure out how you get all these 1,200 different proteins randomly by unguided processes. But the story doesn't end there, because a minimal cell, a minimal bacteria, requires about 200,000 proteins. It requires thousands of copies of one specific protein, like ATP synthase, which makes ATP, which is the energy currency in the cell. So you would have to figure out the odds to have a minimal cell with 200,000 proteins, each one assembled randomly together. But it doesn't end there. If you would have just one cell to start life, certainly you would have an extinction, because we all know that with copying and replication you have mutations. Then you would have a big accumulation of mutations, and in the end there would be an extinction. So you would need a minimal number of a life of cells to actually start life and then diversifying. And the threshold in order not to have the extinction is about 10,000 cells. And if you make the calculation to get this minimal population, it is 1 in 10 to the power of a trillion. So in the realm of the absolutely impossible. And this is a very powerful argument, because we can make the calculations and the statistics, and it points clearly to design. We as intelligent beings, we can make machines, we can make codes, we can make blueprints, we can make chemical factories. Intelligence can do it. Non-intelligence has never been shown.
Then we're
to be
getting off
able
track.
to
I'm
do it.
sorry, but then I'm sorry, but it doesn't point to design. It points to evolution. And I apologize. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
Okay, and
Angelo,
you
but
know what?
you're going on and reading your book.
Okay, I'm glad, Andre, that there are people like you who are Christian and who believe in evolution, because I believe that so many people believe in evolution. They need people like you who believe in evolution and believe in the creator. Okay, I
Yes,
know,
and
but
see God in the
the whole
creation.
point of this is not to argue about evolution. And so I just want to say thank you, everyone, for sharing your perspectives. And if anyone challenges wants to challenge, I'm happy. Bring it on. Try to challenge the law of abiogenesis. Try to challenge. Show me where we have shown life coming from non-living things and natural processes. I would really love to have that conversation with you, because I already know it's not true. It's in the realm of the impossible, like Otangelo stated. So thank you guys. And if you know, just I put a few videos in the chat. I don't want to overwhelm people. I put very short video, I mean, not in the chat, in the description of this video, really short, like 3-minute videos of some of the processes that are involved in life, that when you watch these, things should become really clear. If you've still been unsure about, you know, hey, can life come about by natural processes? You should be able to watch these videos and just see what would be involved in that. And that's just a few of the processes involved in life. So there's many more, like Otangelo mentioned. And thank you guys for coming on. Everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for all of your questions and comments. And God bless you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.